Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm an Airbus pilot, and welcome to the approach tutorial in the iniBuilds Airbus A350. We're about to approach 10,000 feet, and that means we can soon run the 10,000 feet flow pattern. Before we do that though, we're about to enter some clouds. We do have temperatures that are below plus 10 degrees Celsius, so let's turn the engine anti-ice on. Also, let's use the moment to get rid of any of those sunshades so that we have a nice and clean cockpit by the time that we start our arrival. Now, as we're approaching 10,000 feet, we can now run the 10,000 foot flow, and for that one, we are going to do the following. So, we start right on the top over here again by turning the landing lights on, ensuring that our seatbelts are on, and then we move down to the EFIS control panel. Up here, we make the selections as we see fit for the arrival, so you basically got to keep it safe. So, do you need the weather radar? Do you need the terrain? You surely do need the constraints. So that's the kind of selections that you make over here. You also want to keep it at a reasonable range, by the way. Now, after that, you do activate the LS button if you are about to fly a precision approach, and that's the 10,000 foot pattern complete. Since we are already clear to an altitude, let's go ahead and run the approach checklist. So that's going to be down here in the checklist menu. Briefing, confirmed, minimum, Baro 794. Complete down to the line, and since we are clear to an altitude, we can do the checklist below the line as well. That's going to be Baro Ref, QNH 1022, approach checklist complete. Now you might have noticed something on the primary flight display here. That little magenta thing appeared around the VDEF dot, and this one is an indicator that the aircraft is going to fly, or going to fly more precisely than what you would normally see with the green dot. So it's an indication that we're flying a little bit more precise now, favoring our altitude guidance to a higher extent. Now, normally at some point during an approach you would probably receive radar vectors. So let's go ahead and have a look at what we are going to do. If you don't get radar vectors, well, just fly all along the route until you eventually end up on the final approach and can activate the approach button. If you do get radar vectors, which is going to be the case in 99% of all approaches that I've flown in the real world, the remaining last percent just got a direct to the final approach fix or the waypoint before that, then things are going to look a little bit different. So let's go to heading mode right now by pulling the heading knob. You can see this reverts us into vertical speed mode because descent mode is no longer available. Well, let's make a right hand turn over here onto a heading of, let's say, 290. And now we've got to clean up the flight plan. This is of utmost importance. If you don't clean up the flight plan, you will not have missed approach guidance available. So very, very important. So how do we do it? Well, the easiest way is just to create an extended centerline. And this is done by going to the direct page. Then we are going to select the final approach fix or final approach point, or any of those points on the extended centerline there. Let's go for Whiskey Whiskey 971 as I've selected right now. Hit enter on that, then you go to course in, and you enter or cross-check the runway track in there. We can see up here on the flight plan that the runway track is 339, so let's enter 339 as the course in down here, pretty much like that. Now we hit direct to insert, and you can see that now the entire flight plan has vanished all the way to here. Now, when you do this, you can see that nav mode arms in blue, and that is something that you want to be aware of and that you want to correct. If ATC does not clear you to intercept that final, then you don't want nav mode active. Therefore, you'll have to pull the heading knob once again in order to get out of the arming condition for the nav mode down here. Now, when we're getting closer to our final approach, there's a few things that we've got to do. First of all, as we start receiving the ILS, you do want to check that the identifier is correct. That's Oscar Echo November over here on the chart, and Oscar Echo November over here on our primary flight display. Now, Once we are cleared for the approach, we can arm the localizer and the glide slope modes, but a little bit of caution needs to be taken with the glide slope mode. So localizer can basically be armed at any point, because it is rather unlikely that you will encounter some side lobes. For the glide slope, however, that could happen. Now, what is a side lobe? Basically, if you have a 3-degree ILS, then you would also have a glide slope at a 9-degree angle. That happened to the Turkish A330 somewhere, or I believe it was a 747, that just came in much too steep, eventually crashed the aircraft on the approach. So be rather careful, cross-check that the data that you see actually makes sense. But let's go ahead and continue our descent here down to 3,000 feet. And let's now have a look at the symbology that we see on our nav display, because this has changed a little bit from our previous favorite Airbuses. So we all know the decel point. That's the one where the approach phase is automatically going to activate. But after of that, you can actually see some more pseudo waypoints over there. And that one with a 2 in there. That means at that point the aircraft wants you to go to flaps 2. So if we talk about the standard sequence of events on an approach with the Airbus A350, then contrary to older Airbuses where events were altitude-based, respectively distance-based, we now have these things calculated by our FMS. So that's pretty cool, isn't it? Let's now assume that we're cleared for the approach. We're going to press the approach button, engage the second autopilot. Now we can see we have Land 3 dual. Note that this is now called Land 3, no longer Cat 3. Autopilot 1 and 2, glide slope and localizer blue. Now, latest 15 miles from the runway, Airbus wants the approach phase to be active and wants you to reduce that speed. If you overfly the decel point, that's going to happen automatically. If you don't, you got to do that yourself. Now, I'm going to do it myself here because we are now 16 miles out and we see that the decel point is still 2.5 miles away. So, in order to activate the approach phase manually, go to the performance page and then hit activate approach phase, confirm that down here, and once that is done, the speed target is going to go down to your VLS, respectively to your V approach. Typically VLS plus a little bit, depending on the wind. Now, when the aircraft is losing its speed, it is eventually going to reach the green dot speed, and it will maintain that. It's not going to go below green dot as long as the speed is managed. If you go to selected, then it is going to go below that. So we do have localizer star right now. The aircraft is intercepting the localizer. We're waiting for the glide slope to come in. You can see on the VSD that, or rather you can see on the nav display, that we're supposed to leave 3000 at the Fox India 34, so in about 5 nautical miles. So we do have a little bit of time available right now. There's 2 markers on our nav display. Now the first one here should read 1. That's where it wants you to go into flaps 1. The second one then reads 2. That's where it wants you to go into flaps 2. So small bug here on the number, but again I am using a pre-release beta version of the aircraft to record this.
2,500.
Checked. Now we're outside of any icing conditions, so we can turn engine anti-ice back off again up here. And now it's literally just waiting until we reach the desired point over here. Ignoring that VNAV bugging out. Here we go, that's better. Note how you also see the 3D terrain relief down there. Really useful thing. Now we're approaching the first point. That's where we should go flaps 1. So let's go down here and select flaps 1. Now the aircraft is reducing automatically to the S speed. As you can see by that magenta dot, it's going to maintain that S speed. We're reaching flaps 2, or the flaps 2 pseudo waypoint there. So let's go into flaps 2. But be aware that this profile is pretty slow. So basically you could go to selected speed, fly a little bit faster here. That would certainly help air traffic control out. But we want to extend the landing gear when we are 2,500 feet above the field elevation. So as we've just captured the glide slope, let's go gear down. And when we do that, we also arm the spoilers and we switch the nose light into the takeoff position. Glide slope has captured, so we can set our missed approach altitude, and you might notice something when looking at the altitude up here on the PFD. You can see it's turned white. Now, a white altitude means that the aircraft is on approach logic, and it is not going to level off at that altitude. So this might be interesting if we had a go-around altitude of, let's say, 2,000 feet, like that. By looking at it in white, you can tell that the aircraft is not going to level off over there. So that's a pretty useful thing. Alright, now, with the landing gear down, let's go for flaps 3. That's speed checked, flaps 3. And then we can do the landing checklist. So that's cabin crew, advised, auto thrust, speed, auto brake, BTV, and then we have runway condition. Now that's one that you may not have seen before. That refers to the runway condition up here. So if it was wet, you would have to select that using the knob on the side over here. You can see how that changes around. But it is dry today, so we confirm runway condition, dry. The ECAM memo itself is automatically sensed, and that's our landing checklist completed. Now, the stable approach gate is 1,000 feet, and that concludes the approach tutorial. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you learned something today. Be sure to leave your feedback in the comments underneath the video. I'm really looking forward to them. In the meantime, be sure to like, comment and subscribe, and if you really love what I'm doing on this channel, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me Coffee link in the video description below. Thank you for watching, and I'm looking forward to see you all again on the next one.